Okay. So as we were putting on our shoes for school the other day, Miss O asked, "What did Bumpa, my dad, think
Mhm.
of your divorce?" I was like, oh boy,
Out of
that
the clear
answer.
blue. There was like
Right.
no nothing, no preamble to this. This is just putting on my shoes and off she went.
Yeah, there wasn't any preamble, but because of Buttercup the bunny that died, we've been talking about death recently and how that um all the events tied together, Okay, so Bumpa died before Biscuit the dog.
Mhm.
And, mostly Mr. D is asking those questions. He's just trying to put the stories together.
Mhm.
And so, um, Bumpa has been nearby, maybe just in our storytelling, but that's come up a couple times.
Mhm.
But so she asked that question, and I thought, oh boy, that answer
Yeah.
is going to make us late for school. So, I told her I'd tell her later, and I scooted the kids into the car. And then it wasn't until we were snuggling into bed that night that I realized I hadn't answered the question. And, Mr. D had drifted off to sleep. So it was a really quiet moment for Miss O and
Mhm.
me. And
Mhm.
so I circled back to the question and I waited in. And my parents didn't say much about my divorce. I told Miss O that it took time for the divorce to play out, and my dad was generally supportive, but he didn't weigh in on any particular point, knowing that I was still figuring it out.
Mhm.
And so then I asked her if she noticed when the lights in our eyes dim, and I tried to explain how the twinkle in our eye often reflects our inner state.
Mhm.
When we're tired, we glow a little less. And even if the words we are saying sound nice and positive, sometimes the eyes don't match.
Mhm.
She thought about that a little bit and she said, "Oh, like when Ati, her aunt, Lindsay,
Mhm.
who's also been on the podcast,
Mhm.
like when Ati says she can tell I'm getting sick because my eyes look funny."
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I pressed on. I said that the in that time of my life, my eyes had grown dull. That
Mm.
however my life looked on the outside and whatever front I put on, I was
Mhm.
unhappy and a little lost.
Mhm.
And I told her that my divorce was what kicked off me doing my work. It was when I started meditating, I started listening to my inner voice, and
Yeah.
stopped drinking and smoking. That it led me, and that all that work led me to connect at a deeper level with my dad.
Mhm.
So that led me into telling her about that last breakfast that I had with my dad before my parents drove to Tucson for the winter. And I'd made them some cupcakes and I brought them with me um, when I met them for breakfast at the varsity restaurant. And I told her about that last line from my dad that has meant so much to me. When he
Mhm.
looked at me and he said, "You look good." And
Mhm.
how I knew it didn't have anything to do with my hair or clothes, but it had to
Yeah.
do with that sparkle in my eyes.
Mhm.
And she totally got it. She said,
Yeah.
"You didn't know that would be the last time you saw him in person."
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Right.
And what a gift.
Mhm. And
Mm.
it was such a gift because it was, that intergenerational healing that we've always talked about.
Mhm.
So as she curled into her pillow, I apologized for the long answer, and she smiled and she sleepily said, "I like long answers."
Oh.
And it wasn't until I walked out of the bedroom that I connected the dots.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, we don't tell our stories
Mhm.
until someone asks.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of a phrase from the always brilliant and witty Jack Canfor. "I'm an open book, but I just don't know how to find the best pages."
Yeah.
And that connection that I had with my dad at the end of his life came because I took the time to ask him questions
Mhm.
and the risk to go deep. And in return, I got to hear his stories. And I'm thinking of the ones where he shared how he navigated life. And he explained to me about listening to his inner voice to become a pastor. And
Mhm.
the first time he heard that sort of inner voice suggestion, he was on a retreat and he thought, that is the weirdest idea I have ever had. But it
Mhm.
wouldn't go away. And
Yeah,
so
reject, reject, reject.
exactly.
Next.
Nope,
Yeah.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah. Right.
Um, so he signed up to work with the Wycliffe Bible translators in Peru for a summer when he was in college. And he said that he expected missionaries would be misfits, but instead he found a group of bright and winsome, that was his word, and I'll never forget that
Ooh.
because it was such a
Ooh.
good word, and
Ooh.
delightful people. And that small, insistent voice to become a pastor just got stronger.
Mm.
And I'd heard parts of that story before, but not the part about the inner voice.
Mhm.
And it helped me so much because I was listening to my inner voice,
Yeah.
not only about the changes I was making in my life, but to talk to him and record his stories.
Mhm.
You know, I would love to have my dad know my children, to feel that love that he had in spades, meet
Mhm.
their delightful openness. And it
Yeah.
would be such a pleasure to just sit in on that beautiful love fest. But when I tell stories about my dad,
Mhm.
it's another way to feel that ripple all over again.
Yeah.
And I know that Miss O is going to go through that phase where she's more focused on her own life than questions about mine, as
Mhm.
she should.
Mhm.
And this is where I think writing and podcasting can help us store bits of ourselves. What were our inflection points and what made us laugh and what was meaningful and
Yeah.
how did we overcome the rough patches?
Yeah.
Um, what were the things we wouldn't wish on anyone else, but just made us so strong?
Yeah.
But for now, I'm just so lucky that she asked questions, and it just reminds me we can hear these connective tissue stories. We just have to ask.